Elias Blackwood hadn't known a woman's touch in 15 years, not since the relentless fever had stolen his beloved Eleanor and marooned him on a Montana mountain that cared little for his existence. The sharp wind of the grizzly peaks had become his sole companion, and silence, thick and heavy, had long since wrapped around him like a second skin. Then, on a crisp September afternoon in 1884, a woman with auburn hair and eyes the color of emeralds collapsed at his cabin door, whispering words that tore his solitary world clean in two. "I'm your bride." But Elias Blackwood had never written for a bride. The morning it all began had felt no different from the thousands before it. Elias woke before dawn in the narrow bed he had slept in alone since 1869. The cabin was cold, the kind of mountain chill that seeped into bone and memory alike. Frost traced intricate white patterns across the window glass, and he could see his own breath in the dim light. Routine, an unwavering anchor, kept grief from rising too close to the surface. He dressed in silence, the same sturdy denim shirt, the same patched wool trousers, the same boots with a heel that needed mending. He did not rush. There was nowhere to be except the pasture and back again. He built a fire in the iron stove with steady hands, kindling first, then split logs. The scent of pine smoke filled the small cabin. He poured water into the tarnished copper kettle and waited for it to boil. Coffee came next, strong and bitter. He drank it standing at the window while the sky over the grizzly peaks shifted from black to deep purple to a pale, promising gold. He did not think of Eleanor, not directly. That kind of thinking hurt too much. Instead, he counted the cattle in his head. 12 head, 2 calves born in spring, a fence broken on the north line, the barn roof leaking. Always work to be done. Work was better than remembering. He reached for his hat and stepped toward the door. That was when he heard it. A sound that did not belong. Wheels. Elias froze with his hand on the latch. No one came up the mountain anymore. Not since he had made it clear he wanted no visitors. The only man who had tried was Silas Cobb from Silver Creek, and Elias had driven him off 2 years ago. The sound grew louder, wagon wheels grinding over ruts, a horse breathing hard. Elias grabbed his Winchester repeater from beside the door and stepped outside. The morning air was sharp, and frost covered the grass like scattered glass. And coming up the narrow trail toward his cabin was a stagecoach. Not a supply wagon, not a rancher's cart, a passenger stagecoach. The horses were lathered with sweat, and the driver looked tired enough to fall from his seat. He pulled the team to a stop in Elias's yard and climbed down slowly. "This the Blackwood homestead?" the driver called. Elias kept the rifle low but visible. "Depends who's asking." "Got a delivery for Elias Blackwood." "You him?" "I don't order deliveries." The driver gave a tired shrug and walked to the back of the coach. "Well, someone did. Paid good money, too. St. Louis to here." "St. Louis." The driver opened the coach door and held out a hand. "Come on, miss. We're here." Elias's breath caught. A pale hand appeared first, thin fingers gripping the driver's palm. Then a woman stepped down. She looked no older than her late 30s. Her hair was auburn, pulled back in a loose bun that had mostly fallen apart during travel. Dust clung to her gray dress. Her face was pale with exhaustion, but her emerald eyes were clear and stubborn. She stood in his yard like she had crossed the entire world to get there. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she took 2 shaky steps toward him. Her legs gave out. Elias dropped the Winchester and lunged forward just in time to catch her before she hit the ground. She was lighter than he expected, all bones and trembling breath. She smelled of dust and travel and something faintly floral. He hadn't held a woman in 15 years. The shock of it nearly made him pull away. "I'm sorry," she whispered weakly. You're about to fall," Elias said roughly. "That's what you are." She tried to stand but swayed again. He caught her a second time and did not let go. "Bring her things," Elias told the driver. Inside the cabin, he laid her gently on the old sofa near the stove, the same sofa where Eleanor once sat reading on winter nights. He pushed the thought away. The driver placed a canvas duffel and a small beaded reticule by the door. "She's been traveling near a week," the man said. "Kept saying she had to reach the Pine Ridge Ranch. Had a letter." A letter. The driver handed him an envelope, worn from handling. Elias's name was written across the front in careful script, not his handwriting. She read it over and over, the driver added, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Elias waited until the driver left before opening it. The words inside made his stomach turn cold. It was a proposal, written as if by him, signed with his name. It invited a woman named Rosalind Vance from St. Louis to travel west and become his wife. Elias's hands tightened on the paper. He had written no such letter. Behind him a soft voice spoke. "Is it really you?" He turned. The woman was sitting up now, her eyes fixed on him with desperate hope. "Are you Elias Blackwood?" "Yes," he said slowly, "but I did not write this." She stared at him like he had struck her. "My name is Rosalind Vance," she said. "You wrote to me. You said you wanted a wife. You said I would be treated with respect." "I did not write that letter." Her face drained of color. "No," she whispered. "No, you have to be mistaken. I gave up everything. I sold what little I had. Her voice broke. "I cannot go back." Elias saw something deeper than embarrassment in her eyes. Not just disappointment. Fear. "Miss Vance," he said carefully. "Someone used my name. I do not know why." She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "I answered an advertisement. I needed to leave St. Louis. Your letter was the only kind one." "Kind?" Elias swallowed hard. He had not been kind in a long time. "When did you last eat?" he asked quietly. She blinked, confused by the question. "I cannot remember." He moved to the stove and began pulling out what little food he had: bread, dried beef, preserves. He placed a plate in her hands. She ate slowly at first, then faster. He watched from across the room, uneasy at the sight of another living soul inside his cabin. After she finished, she looked at him again. "You could have turned me away," she said softly. "You collapsed in my yard," he replied. "Well, what kind of man would I be if I left you there?" She held his gaze. "The kind I'm used to." He did not ask what she meant. "You can take the bed tonight," he said instead. "I will sleep out here." Her eyes widened. "I cannot take your bed." "You can and you will." She hesitated, then nodded. The fight seemed to drain out of her all at once. "Just for a few days," she said. "Please let me rest. Then I will leave." He should have said no. Instead, he heard himself say, 3 days. Relief washed over her face. He showed her to the bedroom. She stepped inside quietly, as if afraid the walls might reject her. When the door closed, Elias stood alone in the hallway, holding the forged letter. There was only one man who would have done this. Silas Cobb. Silas had begged him for years to stop living like a ghost, and had said more than once that Elias was wasting away on this mountain. Elias clenched his jaw. "Damn you, Silas," he muttered. But anger did not change the fact that Rosalind Vance was now sleeping in his bed, exhausted and frightened, with nowhere else to go. That night, Elias lay on the sofa, staring at the ceiling. He listened to the soft sound of her breathing in the next room. The cabin felt different, not quieter, not louder, just alive. The next morning, he woke to the smell of coffee. For a moment, his heart stopped. It felt like stepping back 15 years. He sat up quickly. Rosalind stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, hair braided neatly. Sunlight fell across her auburn hair like fire. "I hope you do not mind," she said. "You fed me. It seemed fair." He stared at her. No one had stood in his kitchen in 15 years. They ate together at the small table by the window. "I believe you," she said suddenly. "About what? That you did not write the letter?" He exhaled slowly. "So where does that leave us?" he asked. Rosalind folded her hands. "I have a proposal." He raised an eyebrow. "Not marriage," she said quickly, color rising in her cheeks. "An arrangement. Let me stay 1 month. I will cook, clean, mend, help with the homestead in exchange for shelter, separate rooms. No expectations." He almost laughed. "A month." She met his gaze steadily. "I cannot go back to St. Louis. Please." There was again fear. He studied her face. She was not foolish, not weak, just worn down. Finally, he nodded once. 1 month. But we ride into Silver Creek tomorrow. I want answers." She let out a breath she had been holding. "Agreed." He extended his hand. "Elias." She took it. "Rosalind." Her fingers were warm in his. And for the first time in 15 years, Elias Blackwood did not feel entirely alone. The next morning dawned clear and sharp, the kind of mountain morning that showed no mercy to doubt. Elias hitched the wagon in silence while Rosalind stood beside him, her hands folded tight in front of her. She looked pale, but steady. They rode down the mountain trail towards Silver Creek with the wind cutting across their faces. Elias kept his eyes on the dusty road. Rosalind watched the town grow closer with something that looked like dread. Silver Creek was small, only one long street lined with wood buildings, the Silver Creek Chapel at one end and the Rattlesnake's Den saloon at the other. Everyone noticed when a stranger arrived. They noticed Rosalind. Heads turned as Elias drove into town. Whispers followed them like shadows. He pulled the wagon in front of Cobb's General Goods and Post. The sign above the door read Cobb's General Goods and Post, though Silas had no sons. Elias climbed down first and helped Rosalind from the seat. She hesitated only a second before taking his hand. Inside the store, the smell of sawdust and oil filled the air. Silas stood behind the counter, writing in a ledger. "You want to turn around, Silas?" Elias said. Silas froze, slowly. He looked up. His eyes landed on Rosalind, then on Elias. He sighed. Ed, you wrote the letter," Elias said flatly. Silas rubbed his beard. "Yes." Rosalind stood very still beside Elias. "Ew." She cleared her throat, forged his name. "I did." "What?" Elias demanded. Silas stepped around the counter. "Because you've been dying up there, Elias. 15 years of silence and ghosts. I was tired of watching you fade. So, you dragged a stranger across the country on a lie." Silas looked at Rosalind, and for the first time, there was regret in his eyes. "I read her letter to the agency. She was asking for a fresh start. Said she needed a decent man. You're decent, Elias, whether you believe it or not." "You had no right," Elias said. "Maybe not, but I'd do it again." Rosalind spoke quietly. "You used me." Silas nodded. "I did, and I'm sorry for that, but I hoped you might save each other." The words hung in the air. Elias felt anger, but underneath it was something else, the truth that Rosalind had already changed his cabin in ways he did not want to admit. "We made an agreement," Rosalind said. "1 month I help at the ranch." Silas looked surprised. "You're staying for now?" Silas studied Elias. "And you're allowing it?" "It's none of your concern." Silas held up his hands. "All right, I won't interfere again." But as Elias turned to leave, Silas added softly, "You don't look like a dying man anymore." Elias did not answer. Outside, Rosalind climbed back into the wagon. The whispers followed them again as they drove away. "People are staring," she said. "Let them. They think I'm something improper. They think too much." She looked at him. "Does it bother you?" No, that was not entirely true. Back at the Pine Ridge homestead, they fell into a routine. Rosalind woke early and made coffee. She cleaned corners Elias had stopped seeing. She mended shirts that had been frayed for years. She scrubbed the floors until the wood showed its grain again. Outside, Elias worked the fence while she brought him water in the afternoons. "You do not have to work so hard," he told her one day. "I do," she replied. "If I am not useful, what am I? You are not here to earn your existence." She looked at him strangely. "That is not how the world works. It is how this ranch works." That evening, they sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The sky burned orange and purple. "It's beautiful," Rosalind whispered. "It is. You've been alone here all this time." "Yes." "Did it make the pain easier?" Elias thought about Eleanor's last breath. About the empty bed. "No," he said honestly. "It just made it quiet." Rosalind nodded slowly. "Sometimes quiet can be worse." Days passed, then weeks. Rosalind's presence settled into the cabin like light through a window. She laughed when the chickens chased her. She hummed while she cooked. She asked questions about the cattle and listened to his answers. And Elias found himself talking more than he had in years. One evening by the fire, Rosalind finally told him about St. Louis. "There was a man," she said, staring into the flames. "His name was Maxwell Thorne. He was a timber magnate I worked for as a bookbinder." Caleb's jaw tightened. "He promised marriage," she continued. "Said he loved me. I believed him." "And he was married?" "Yes." Her voice did not shake. It was steady, like she had repeated this story too many times to herself. When his wife discovered the truth, oh, she made sure everyone knew. I lost my job, my room, my name. No one would hire me. Elias felt anger rise inside him. He said if I stayed quiet, he would take care of me, Rosalind said bitterly. But I would have been hidden, owned. And you refused? Yes. She looked at him then, eyes bright with pain. That is why I needed to leave St. Louis. That is why I answered the advertisement. I thought I could start over somewhere no one knew me, and instead you found a man who did not write the letter. She gave a small smile. Yes, instead I found you. Silence filled the room. Do you regret it? He asked. Not yet. That answer stayed with him. As the month drew closer to its end, the air between them changed. Small touches lingered longer. Their hands brushed over the same tools. Their shoulders bumped in narrow doorways. One night in the barn, Rosalind struggled to lift a saddle. Elias took it from her. You do not have to prove yourself every moment. I am not proving myself, she said quickly, then softer. Maybe I am. He stepped closer. You are not a burden. She met his eyes. You were counting the days. He froze. I was, he admitted, at first. And now, he hesitated. Now I'm not sure I want you to leave. The words settled between them like something fragile. Rosalind's breath caught. You do not mean that. Ido. Her eyes filled with tears she did not let fall. Elias, I cannot survive hoping for something that will be taken away. He understood that fear. Then do not hope, he said quietly. Just stay. For what? For this. He did not know how else to name it. That night, sitting by the fire, the truth finally broke free. I love you, Elias said, the words rough and unfamiliar. Rosalind stared at him. You do not have to say it back, he added quickly. But it is true. She stepped toward him and pressed her hands to his chest. I love you too, she whispered. I was just afraid to admit it. He kissed her then, slow at first, careful. 15 years of loneliness and 1 month of growing closeness met in that single moment. When they pulled apart, everything had changed. But the mountain did not allow peace for long. 3 days later, riders came. Elias saw them from the yard. 3 men with hard faces and colder eyes. The leader stepped forward. We're looking for a woman from St. Louis. Auburn hair, emerald eyes. Elias's hand went to his Winchester. Never heard of her. The man smiled. Her name is Rosalind Vance. She stole from her employer $10,000 in jewels. Rosalind stepped out of the cabin behind Elias. I stole nothing, she said. The man tipped his hat. Mr. Thorne says otherwise. The name hit like a gunshot. You tell Mr. Thorne I am not coming back, Rosalind said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. He's coming himself, the man replied. With papers. They rode off, leaving dust and threat behind. Rosalind's knees weakened. Elias caught her. He found me, she whispered. He looked toward the trail, jaw tight. Let him come, Elias said. This time you are not alone. Maxwell Thorne arrived 3 days later in a gilded phaeton that did not belong in a town like Silver Creek. The horses were tall and groomed. The brass on the carriage shone in the sun. He stepped down dressed in a fine suit, boots without dust, hair slicked back like he had never known hardship. He looked like success. He looked like power. And when his eyes found Rosalind standing beside Elias outside Sheriff Hayes' office, he smiled like he had already won. Rosalind, he said smoothly, as if greeting an old friend. You look well. Rosalind's hand tightened around Elias's. I'm Mrs. Blackwood now, she replied. Thorne's smile flickered for only a second before returning. Of course. A quick marriage. How convenient. Sheriff Hayes stood at the doorway, holding a folder of documents. His expression was troubled. He's filed formal charges, the sheriff said quietly. The warrant is valid. Elias's chest burned. On what proof? Sworn statements, Thorne answered calmly. Witnesses who saw Rosalind taking money and jewelry before she fled St. Louis. It's a lie, Rosalind said. Thorne stepped closer, lowering his voice. Return what you stole, and I will make this disappear. Come back with me quietly. I took nothing, Rosalind repeated, and I would rather die than belong to you. Thorne's eyes hardened. Sheriff, he said coolly, Hayes swallowed. "Rosalind Blackwood, I have to place you under arrest pending the judge's arrival." The sound of metal around her wrists made Elias see red. "You will not take her," he said. Rosalind turned to him, tears in her eyes, but her voice steady. "Let them. We fight this the right way." He wanted to refuse, wanted to break the handcuffs and drag her back to the mountain, but she nodded once, asking for trust. So he stepped aside. They locked her in the small town jail while Thorne watched with satisfaction. 3 days, the sheriff told Elias. The circuit judge arrives then. 3 days. 3 days felt like a lifetime. Elias did not leave town. He sat outside Rosalind's cell for hours, holding her hand through the bars. "We will find a way," he promised. "There is a way," Rosalind whispered on the second night. "I did not tell you everything." She told him then about Daniel, about the man she had loved before Thorne destroyed his work and drove him from St. Louis. About the papers Daniel had copied that proved Thorne had been stealing money from the timber magnate for years. "I gave those papers to a nun," Rosalind said. "Reverend Mother Agnes. She believed me. She kept them safe." Elias's heart pounded. "If we get those papers, we can expose him. He will try to stop it. Then we move faster." That night, Elias sent a telegram to St. Louis. The reply came the next afternoon. "Asterisk documents are on the way. Arriving tomorrow. Trust in God." Asterisk Thorne must have sensed something was wrong. That evening, while Rosalind was being held at the hotel under watch, a bottle filled with oil crashed through the window of her room. Fire swallowed the curtains in seconds. Elias had been outside speaking with Silas when he heard the glass shatter. He ran. Smoke poured from the window. Flames licked across the walls. He did not think. He kicked in a door and rushed inside. Rosalind was coughing, disoriented, trapped between fire and smoke. He wrapped his coat around her and dragged her toward the hallway. A ceiling beam cracked. For a moment, he thought they would both die there. Then, hands grabbed them from behind. Silas and 2 ranch hands pulled them into the street just as the roof collapsed. The hotel burned against the night sky while the town formed a bucket line. Thorne was gone. His men were gone. They knew the evidence was coming, Silas said, soot streaking his face. This was their last move. Rosalind clung to Elias, shaking. "He will never stop," she whispered. "He will," Elias said quietly, "because tomorrow we end it." The next morning, Reverend Mother Agnes arrived in a plain wagon, dust on her gray habit, but fire in her eyes. She carried a sturdy wooden box. Inside were ledgers, copied letters, bank statements, proof of embezzlement, proof of stolen funds, proof that Thorne had been bleeding his employer dry for 5 years. Sheriff Hayes examined the documents in stunned silence. "This is enough," he said finally. "More than enough." The circuit judge arrived that afternoon. Thorne returned too, as if confident his charm would smooth everything over. But when the evidence was placed before the judge, when Reverend Mother Agnes testified, when Elias and Rosalind stood side by side and told the full truth, the mask fell from Thorne's face. The judge's voice echoed in the small courtroom. "All charges against Rosalind Blackwood are dismissed." Rosalind's knees nearly gave out from relief. And based on the evidence presented, the judge continued, "A warrant will be issued for Maxwell Thorne on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and attempted arson." Thorne's composure shattered. "This is absurd," he shouted. "She is lying. They are lying." But no one was listening anymore. One of Thorne's men tried to slip out the back door. Sheriff Hayes and 2 deputies blocked the exit. Thorne was placed in irons in the same room where Rosalind had stood days earlier. As he was led past her, his eyes burned with hatred. "You think this is victory?" he hissed. "You will regret crossing me." Rosalind lifted her chin. "I stopped being afraid of you the day I left St. Louis." He was taken away under guard, bound for trial, and the town exhaled as if it had been holding its breath. Silver Creek chose its side. Mrs. Henderson hugged Rosalind in the street. Silas clapped Elias on the back hard enough to bruise him. "You stubborn fool," Silas said with a grin. "Told you she'd save you." Rosalind looked at Elias through tears and laughter mixed together. "We did this," she said. Together, they rode back to the Pine Ridge homestead that evening as husband and wife in truth, not just in words. The mountains looked different somehow, less like a prison, more like home. Weeks passed. Thorne was convicted in St. Louis. Word reached Silver Creek that he would spend many years in prison. The threat was over. Peace came slowly, like spring after a harsh winter. Rosalind's sewing business grew. Women from town brought dresses and coats to the ranch, where children ran across the yard when they came to visit. The cabin no longer echoed with silence. Laughter filled it. One morning, nearly a year later, Rosalind stood at the window again. But this time her hand rested over her stomach. Elias noticed the glow on her face before she even spoke. "We're going to have a child," she said softly. For a moment, he could not breathe. 15 years of emptiness collapsed under the weight of that single sentence. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. "I thought I had lost everything," he whispered against her hair. "But I was only waiting for you." She smiled up at him, eyes shining. "And I thought I was ruined," she said. "But I was only lost." Outside, the Montana wind moved gently through the grass. The fence had been mended. The barn roof no longer leaked. And inside the once lonely cabin, a man who had not touched a woman in 15 years held his wife close and felt something he had almost forgotten existed: hope. Their story had begun with a lie, but it had ended with truth, with love, and with a future neither of them had believed possible. And on that mountain where silence once ruled, the sound of laughter carried farther than the wind.